On August 16, 1977, a woman named Ginger Alden found a man on the bathroom floor of a mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 42 years old. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia. The autopsy found 14 different prescription drugs in his system. 10 of them were in significant quantities. Most people know Elvis Presley as a symbol: the pelvis, the sequin jumpsuits, the Las Vegas shows, the impersonators. Fewer know the full story. The boy from a 2-room shotgun house in Mississippi who changed music forever. The soldier who came back different. The star who was slowly consumed by the system built around him. He was the most famous entertainer on earth. He was also a man who had not driven a car alone, walked into a store, or eaten a meal in a restaurant without a security detail for the last 20 years of his life. He did not want to die. He wanted to go back on tour. This is the full story of Elvis Presley, from Tupelo to Graceland. Nothing left out. Let's begin. Part 1. Tupelo. 1935 to 1948. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi. In a 2-room shotgun house his father Vernon had built with a $30 loan he later couldn't repay. He was a twin. His brother Jesse Guerin was stillborn. Elvis grew up as an only child who was never entirely alone. His parents, especially his mother Gladys, treated him with an intensity that bordered on devotion. The lost twin was never far from the family's consciousness. Vernon Presley served 8 months in prison for check fraud when Elvis was 3, a humiliation the family never fully recovered from financially or socially. They moved frequently, always poor, always slightly outside whatever community they landed in. Elvis learned early to be watchful, to read rooms, to make people like him. He grew up in the church, the First Assembly of God, where the music was physical and emotional and loud. He absorbed it completely. He also absorbed the blues and gospel pouring out of black radio stations and black churches in the Mississippi Delta, music his white peers often dismissed or feared. Elvis heard it and understood it as his own. In 1948, the family moved to Memphis. They were still poor, living in public housing, Gladys working in a curtain factory. But Memphis had something Tupelo didn't: Beale Street, the record stores, the music. What does it mean to grow up at the exact intersection of 2 musical worlds that have been kept deliberately separate, and to hear both as naturally yours? Part 2. Sun Records. 1953 to 1955. In the summer of 1953, 18-year-old Elvis Presley walked into Sun's studio on Union Avenue in Memphis and paid $4 to record 2 songs as a gift for his mother. He was driving a truck for an electrical company. He had no connections, no plan, and no particular reason to believe anything would come of it. Studio secretary Marion Keisker recorded his session and wrote a note beside his name: "Good ballad singer. Hold." Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, had been saying for years that if he could find a white singer who could sing with the feel of a black artist, he could make $1 billion. He was not being cynical. He was describing a gap in the market created by racial segregation. Music that existed, that was powerful, that white radio stations would not play performed by black artists. In July 1954, Phillips brought Elvis back into the studio with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black. They worked through ballads for hours. Nothing clicked. During a break, Elvis picked up his guitar and started goofing around with Arthur Crudup's "That's All Right," a blues number, playing it loose and fast. Phillips stuck his head out of the booth. "What are you doing?" he asked. "We don't know," they said. "Well, back up and do it again." That session produced something that didn't have a name yet. It would eventually be called rock and roll. Local DJ Dewey Phillips played That's All Right on the radio that night, and the phones didn't stop ringing. He played it 14 times. People wanted to know who the singer was. When told his name, many assumed he was black. He wasn't. That, too, was part of the story. What happens when the walls that have been built between musical traditions collapse, and the person who collapses them becomes the face of something that belonged to someone else first? Part 3. The Explosion. 1956 to 1958. On March 24, 1958, Elvis Presley was inducted into the United States Army. He could have taken a special service assignment, performing for troops, staying stateside. He refused. He said he wanted to serve like any other soldier. 6 weeks after his induction, Gladys Presley was hospitalized with heart failure. Elvis was granted emergency leave. He flew to Memphis. On August 14, 1958, Gladys Presley died of a heart attack. She was 46 years old. Elvis was destroyed. People who were there described a grief that had no bottom, that was physical, total, inconsolable. He wept at the funeral in ways that made the people around him uncomfortable. He had to be physically supported at the graveside. He kept saying he had given her everything, and it wasn't enough. He returned to Germany to finish his service. In Germany, he was introduced to prescription amphetamines, given to him by a sergeant to help soldiers stay awake on maneuvers. He never stopped taking them. He also met a 14-year-old girl named Priscilla Beaulieu, the daughter of an Air Force officer. He began a relationship with her that would eventually lead to marriage. And that, by any modern standard, raises questions that were not asked at the time. He returned to the United States in March 1960, tanned, still handsome, still the biggest star in the world. But something had gone. The people who knew him best said they could see it. His mother was dead, and he had found pills that made the pain smaller. What does it mean to lose the person who was the center of your emotional world? And to find a chemical substitute that works until it doesn't. Part 5. Hollywood and the Wasted Years. 1960 to 1968. The 1960s should have been Elvis's decade to consolidate his greatness. Instead, they were largely wasted. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, a Dutch immigrant named Andreas Cornelis van Cook, who had invented his own biography and possibly fled a murder charge in the Netherlands, had made a decision. Elvis would make movies. Lots of them. Safe, formulaic, profitable movies with soundtrack albums that required no artistic risk and generated enormous revenue. Between 1960 and 1969, Elvis made 27 films. Almost none of them were good. He knew they weren't good. He told interviewers he was embarrassed by them. He kept making them because Parker controlled his career, and Parker wanted the money. What Parker could not do was stop the Beatles. When the Beatles arrived in America in 1964, the same moment Elvis appeared in a film called Kissin' Cousins, the cultural center of gravity shifted in a way that Parker's contracts could not address. Elvis was still famous. He was no longer the future. He retreated to Graceland. The prescription drug use deepened. The circle of people around him, the Memphis Mafia, the entourage of friends and employees who traveled with him everywhere, became increasingly insular. They told him what he wanted to hear. Nobody told him the truth. What happens to a person when everyone around them has a financial interest in their continued cooperation, and none of them have a personal interest in their well-being? We're only halfway through his life. What's coming will surprise you. Part 6. The Comeback. 1968 to 1972. In December 1968, NBC broadcast a television special that became known simply as the '68 Comeback Special. Elvis had not performed live in 8 years. The special was originally conceived as a safe Christmas variety show. Elvis refused. He insisted on performing live, in a small, intimate setting, in front of a real audience, in black leather, playing guitar. What aired was something nobody had expected, least of all the people who had written him off. Elvis Presley sat on a small stage, 33 years old, and proved that everything that had made him extraordinary was still there. The voice was bigger. The musicianship was deeper. The presence was absolute. The special was the highest-rated program of the year. He followed it with a recording session in Memphis, his first in years, that produced Suspicious Minds, his first #1 single since 1962. He went back on the road. In July 1969, he opened at the International Hotel in Las Vegas and played 58 consecutive sold-out shows. It was the largest audience of his career. It was also, in retrospect, the beginning of the end. Las Vegas locked him into a contract, 2 extended seasons per year, an enormous amount of money, a captive audience. The shows were spectacular. They were also relentless. Parker had negotiated terms that gave Elvis no room to rest, to evolve, to do anything other than deliver the show that the contract required. What is the difference between a comeback and a trap? And how do you tell which one you're in while you're still inside it? Part 7. Graceland, 1972 to 1977. By the early 1970s, Elvis Presley's life had contracted to a very small world. Graceland, the tour bus, the Las Vegas stage. He rarely left without a security detail. He slept during the day and was awake at night. The prescription drug use, which had begun with amphetamines in the Army, had expanded into a complex daily regimen of uppers, downers, painkillers, and sleeping pills, all prescribed by a physician named George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, who wrote prescriptions with a compliance that bordered on complicity. In 1973, Elvis and Priscilla divorced. She had left him for her karate instructor, a detail that was humiliating and tabloid-ready and obscured something more painful: that their marriage had been troubled for years, that Elvis's absences and addictions and controlling behavior had made a real partnership impossible. He was devastated by the divorce, in the same total way he had been devastated by his mother's death. He went deeper into the pills. The concerts continued. The shows in the mid-1970s, documented by photographers and journalists, showed a man who was visibly unwell, bloated, sweating, sometimes forgetting lyrics, sometimes slurring between songs. The audience came anyway. Parker kept booking him. In his final years, Elvis developed an obsession with spirituality, with law enforcement. He collected police badges compulsively, and with the idea of returning to his roots, recording a simple gospel album, going back to something real. He talked about it often. He never did it. On August 16, 1977, he was scheduled to depart for a new tour. That afternoon, Ginger Alden found him on the bathroom floor. He was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital at 3:30 p.m. What does it mean to spend your final years dreaming of a simpler version of yourself and never finding your way back to it? Closing. Elvis Presley was 42 years old when he died. He had sold over 1 billion records, more than any other solo artist in history. He had fundamentally altered the course of popular music, of American culture, of what the 20th century sounded like. He had also been managed by a man who never let him grow, drugged by a doctor who never said no, surrounded by people who never told him the truth, and trapped inside a fame so large that it had become its own kind of prison. The house at Graceland is a museum now. 600,000 people visit it every year. They walk through the jungle room, the TV room with 3 screens, the racquetball court where he played at 4 in the morning because there was nowhere else to go. They stand at his grave in the garden. The boy from the 2-room shotgun house in Tupelo never entirely left. He called his mother every day. He bought her a pink Cadillac. He wept at her graveside in a way that made the world uncomfortable. And when she was gone, he spent the rest of his life filling the space she left with things that didn't fit. He was the king. He was also just a man from Mississippi who heard music that moved him and sang it back to the world. The world was never the same. Neither was he. If you found this video worth your time, subscribe and stay. More full stories are coming. Nothing left out.